welcome once again to Living in the 21st Century. Joining me today is Professor Maksym Yali, National Aviation University, Ukraine. Also is Randy Sturgill, a strong ally of the Ukraine. Gentlemen, it's good to have you on today.
You're welcome.
Yes. First, I want to start with Maksym. A lot of things had happened this week. It's a turning point, both in the history of the United States of America as well as for Ukraine. And I think the world is shocked at a lot of things that were said and done over the past week. First, I want to start with Monday. It appears that the United States would have voted against Ukraine and sides with Russia, China, and North Korea, etc. Then, most recently, the president, he also wants to discuss a minerals deal with Ukraine. And apparently, my question I want to ask you, Maksym, do you think this minerals deal is really to protect indefinitely Ukraine from any attacks from Russia? Or is this some antic that is being played out to allow Russia to regroup and come again to attack Ukraine in the future and other European countries if possible?
Well, actually, of course, it cannot guarantee Ukraine that Russia will not start aggression again after the ceasefire. And we have already historical episodes. For example, President Yanukovych signed in 2013, if I'm not mistaken, if not 2012, contracts with American companies to explore gas in Donbass, just in the parts particularly occupied, and they were supposed, I would say, Ukraine, with the help of American companies, were supposed to compensate its dependence on Russian gas, midterm scenario until 2019. And the program was already begun, but it didn't prevent from the military aggression of Russia against Ukraine in 2014 after the annexation of Crimea. So definitely, and I'm just talking, given the example about the companies, American companies, which are, as well known, key sponsors of Republican Party, energy sector, gas, oil, and now they are negotiating, for example, with Putin already, delegation of the United States concerning prospects of exploring Arctic shelf and other parts. So definitely no guarantees. And the point is that without troops, without Peace Corps contingent, it was actually the minimum guarantees which could be reached in case, well, of course, we're not talking about joining NATO. It's impossible in a long, short-term perspective, as many times President Trump have mentioned, but actually we didn't receive any guarantees or invitation when the president of the US was Joseph Biden as well. And actually, I didn't believe in short-term or mid-term perspectives of Ukraine joining NATO because, well, the decision had been made on the base of consensus. And for example, when the president of the United States was standing for joining Ukraine to NATO, as it was in 2008 on Bucharest summit of NATO, Germany and France voted against to give a roadmap to Ukraine to join NATO. So from this point of view, as we can see, and as I have many times Donald Trump mentioned during last week, he is not going to give any security guarantees to Ukraine. So which, of course, is absolutely unacceptable for Ukrainian side to agree for the ceasefire, because as President Zelensky mentioned during his press conference in the White House, since 2014, 2015, we had more than 25 ceasefire, and they all were violated by Russian Federation. So ceasefire is definitely not the option for Ukraine. And definitely President Donald Trump, as he stated many times, he wants just to get a Nobel Prize to freeze the conflict, and he is sure that Putin will not will not violate this ceasefire until he's a president. But of course, for Ukraine, taken into account its negative experience starting from 1994, when we gave up third nuclear potential in the world, and it was these agreements were violated not only by Russian Federation but also by US and Great Britain. In 2014 we didn't get any support, etc., etc. So of course for us these conditions are absolutely unacceptable, and that was actually President Zelensky was trying to tell and to give some arguments to Donald Trump, who is not ready, unfortunately, to listen to these arguments.
Yeah, I want to look at this carefully, because it appears now that, I don't want to say officially ties are severed from NATO, but we know in the future that it's Trump's attention to sever ties from NATO, because they think that the United States were the one who was harnessing all the weight and putting in more than the other European countries. Well, now it appears that this is what it's going to be, and England may very well have to step up as the leader of the free world. What is the European nations collectively thinking in terms of support for Ukraine going down through the years, since this war may be going on for a while?
Well, actually, just after the press conference, many European leaders standed for support Ukraine, that they will keep supporting Ukraine in case, even just if the US stop giving us military and financial support. Another case and important point is that, unfortunately, if we talk about military assistance, yes, European countries cannot substitute US military assistance, because they just do not have enough of production facilities and storages. Even United States actually doesn't have enough of production facilities to produce enough of shells, missiles, rockets to supply Ukraine on the needed level. The point is that the United States have a lot of weapons on the storages, and which they have been given to us for these 3 years, but actually a part of it was 20 or 30 years old, as for example ATACMS missiles here, and were supposed to be eliminated because they were too old and dangerous. But unfortunately, besides, we should take into account such a factor that the decisions inside US, inside EU are made on the basis of consensus, and we have seen already many problems because, for example, Hungary, the leader of Hungary, Prime Minister Orban, constantly is trying to block military assistance, financial assistance of EU to Ukraine, blackmailing Ukraine, blackmailing EU members. Besides, last year there appeared his partner, the Prime Minister of Slovak Republic, Fico. He also joins and stands against continuing military support and wants to, this war to be over as soon as possible, and no matter on which conditions, meaning like conditions of Russia. So therefore, besides, as you can see, European leaders are not ready for such challenges, unfortunately. And 3 years have passed, and it takes them too much time to make decisions, and very important decisions, but we are lack of time. And if it concerns military support, of course, it takes both financial support and political will. But we don't see such a political will at least among all the leaders of the EU.
Since it appears also that again that U.S. may be out of the picture of NATO, would it not be easier to allow Ukraine, which supposed to be the largest European nation, I think, to be drafted into NATO and allow you to produce and make nuclear weapons as a way of protecting yourself?
Well, actually, if we join NATO, we will not be the biggest EU country from the point of view of population, but from the point of view of the army, the amount of soldiers and strength, and what is more important, experience. Of course, we are number one now force in the Europe, and of course would strengthen NATO and serve as a deterrence to Russian Federation. That's what we're trying to explain to our allies and partners. But as I have mentioned, the problem is that far not European leaders, not talking about US president, support this idea. So I guess this variant we should not consider. Besides, NATO is facing serious problems inside, and as I told you, for many years, the armies, for example, okay, just give you some examples. Great Britain, amount of army, well, 70,000 soldiers. Well, we have more than 1 million with experience, yeah. Germany even less. And these are the main powers inside EU and NATO. So of course they all relied on United States, such called nuclear umbrella, and the military potential has been diminishing for decades. And of course, NATO definitely would become stronger in case Ukraine joins it.
Okay. Randy, I want to ask you this question. You are a strong ally of Ukraine. You, as a patriot of this nation, you have done it all. Yesterday, what you would have recognized in your life happening in Washington by the leaders of this country. I mean, I don't even see anything called diplomacy or professionalism. It's everything less than that. What does it say to you? How do you feel about it?
It was pretty much one of the darkest days in American history. No president or administration has ever treated a leader of one of our allied countries in such a manner. I am ashamed of my country. I'm pretty much speechless on what took place, not only yesterday, but during the week with other foreign leaders. But none of them were treated in the way that President Zelensky was treated yesterday. And I actually believe it was all planned before Zelensky's plane even landed in the United States. Many others in this country are shocked as well. The utter change in direction for the United States presidential administration and the Republican parties in the United States is shameful.
I am appalled that the leadership of this country indicated clearly that Ukraine is the aggressor, that President Zelensky is a dictator, and Putin seems to be the nice person. He seems to the good person. The whole world know, the whole world see, they saw for themselves what led up to the Ukraine-Russia war. That day when Russia went on invading Ukraine, Putin himself acknowledged the fact that he invaded Ukraine. We got leadership in this country is declaring the other way around, that Ukraine invaded Russia, right? And to look at the authentication of this story, I question what leadership America have. I mean, is this the kind of leadership you want that can't face the truth, can't face reality, just to be seen in the eyes of the dictators that they are on their side, this seems like pure cowardness and bully. Could you add your pieces on this?
Well, it goes into other situations and other issues in this country. This entire administration is built on lies. They are habitual liars, and getting back to earlier conversations, the U.S. and many European countries have shown that their word is pretty much unreliable. Going back to 2014, the guarantees of protections, they were lies, and the ridiculous things as far as the giving up 50% of the mineral rights in Ukraine, and all the things they're asking for with zero guarantees of any type security from Russia is insane. Again, Vladimir Putin is sitting with his comrades in Moscow, laughing at the world right now, and so that's pretty much where we're at. I don't know at what point the world will be able to trust the United States government again. I'm lost for words, and again, I'm ashamed. And my friend, I do apologize for the actions of my country, but please know there are many U.S. citizens that are standing up even taller today than they were yesterday in support for your country. This is going to be, again, I think, dark days ahead for the U.S. statute in this world. But know that there are folks like me that are standing up and are going to make our voices heard.
Thank you very much, Randy. Yeah, I know that there are plenty of American people and all around the world who still support Ukraine, and we know, I know, and people in Ukraine know so that. Well, the United States also divided now, and elections show it, and before that, and since the full-scale invasion, most of Americans supported Ukraine, and even now public opinion polls show that the majority of Americans keep supporting Ukraine in this war and perfectly know who is the aggressor, and it doesn't concern whether they are Republicans or Democrats. Of course, figures differ. There are more Democrats supporters among those who keep standing for Ukraine, the Democrats and then Republicans, but still. Unfortunately, the decisions have been made in the White House, and we see what we see. The strategy of Donald Trump now and his view on the conflict is much closer to Vladimir Putin's, and he actually wants Ukraine to give up. Of course, it's a capitulation. He stands for capitulation, but not for peace. Because short-term peace we have seen, and of course after all that devastating war, deaths of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian destroyed cities, etc., to come for such conditions of ceasefire without any compensation, of course, it paves the road for the further aggression of Russian Federation after Donald Trump stops being president of the United States. Maximum, who knows, maybe it can happen even earlier.
Yeah, I want to explain something, Maksym, because this is for the simple-minded American, and even some Russians Americans who live here in this country believe that Zelensky is a dictator simply because an election were held. Now, both you and I know for a fact that it's almost 100% difficult to host an election during a hardcore war such as this. Could you just elaborate a little bit and let those folks who got that impression understand it's not that he don't want to do an election, but it is simply because of what's going on at this present time?
Well, actually, okay, a few arguments. Even his political rivals do not want to hold elections in Ukraine, including ex-president Poroshenko, because everybody knows that Ukraine is a democratical country, and during elections, well, it's a real war between different political parties, and now during war we need unity. It's one argument. Another one, that it's just impossible to hold elections even under conditions of ceasefire. Not talking about of continuing war. For example, every day there are rockets, missiles, drones are flying, destroying cities, and about 20% of the territories is occupied already. Millions of Ukrainians had to leave Ukraine and stay abroad, and how to just organize the voting among them, how to organize the elections on the front line among the soldiers who are fighting. Of course, it's impossible. I'm not talking about just those the refugees inside Ukraine as well, millions of them. So tens of millions of Ukrainians cannot participate in that elections, and these elections will not reflect the real results. Besides, well, Great Britain didn't hold elections since, if I'm not mistaken, 1936 until 1945, until the end of the Second World War. But there was no war on their territory. When Donald Trump says, for example, U.S. held elections during the Second World War, but I beg your pardon, there was no war on the territory of the United States. So, of course, these arguments do not match the reality, and it's absolutely impossible to hold elections under such conditions, which will be legitimated. I would say it will not give. Besides, as we can see, public opinion polls show that majority of Ukrainians support President Zelensky and stand against this election. So, of course, we are already to wait until the war is over, and then to hold these elections as it happens, as it should be in democratical state.
Right. We're down to the last 2 minutes. Quickly, Randy, Do you foresee anytime soon that World War III is in the making?
Personally, I'm not an expert on the analysis here, but personally, I feel that all the threats of World War III are all coming from Vladimir Putin. Through that Vladimir Putin, all the talking points of him have now been absorbed by Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and they are now propagandists for Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
I believe it is just saber rattling on his part, and pretty much scare tactics for not only Europe but Ukraine as well.
One quick question down to the last 2 minutes. Do you see, with all the conflict and turmoil and chaos presently that going on within this country, that we are on the verge of a civil war?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I really don't. I've made the comment several times. If the vice president had won the election and Donald Trump had lost, with all the MAGA crazies in this country, that maybe that could have been a possibility.
Okay.
But right now, I don't.
Okay, well, thank you both, Maksym Yali and Randy Sturgill. I thank you both for coming on this morning. And to all those who have been tuning in on Living in the 21st Century, have a great day.